United States, this question is mostly discussed through the lens of what serves American strategic interest. But what serves Iraqis' interest? Is the American occupation, as they would argue, a factor that might assist a political settlement? Or is the American occupation a factor that actually postpones or puts off a settlement?
It's a very difficult question to answer. If you listen to what the Iraqi people are saying in opinion polls, and I realize we have to be very careful about taking seriously opinion polls in a situation of extreme violence such as Iraq. But if you listen to Iraqis, then their gut emotion is, we've had enough of this and please leave. But you listen to the political leaders instead, and I have to say some of these political leaders do not represent a lot of people, others do. But across the board, if you listen to them now, they're quite unanimous in thinking and strongly stating, really, that U.S. forces should not leave precipitously, that they should not leave before U.S. forces have stabilized the situation and have rebuilt Iraqi national security forces.
A lot of the plans that Americans seem to have include the maintenance of permanent military bases in Iraq. We understand some of them are the size of villages where they take buses to cross them. They're so large. And it's hard to imagine, after so many lives and particularly so much money has been spent in Iraq, the U.S. is going to walk away from some kind of control of the oil. How does this unfold?
It's very difficult to see how it will unfold, but I think, yes, the United States is building permanent. Nothing is permanent in this life, but very, bases that are really there for the long term. And clearly, the United States came to Iraq in 2003 in part because it could no longer stay in Saudi Arabia, could not protect oil fields from military bases in Saudi Arabia. This is what triggered Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda in the first place, the U.S. presence in the land of the holy sites of Islam. And so they will have to stay here. And I think as long as they stay, they will face major nationalist opposition from across the Middle East, not just in Iraq, but also across the region. And so I don't think it is a viable option for the United States to stay, to keep its troops on the ground for any length of time. They need to have a clear exit strategy. It needs to be based on a notion that Iraq needs to be rebuilt, that the political structure needs to be rebuilt, and that the army and security forces need to be rebuilt. But beyond that, there should be no role for the United States in the region. It will have to find other ways of protecting its access to oil it can afford.
The one proposal, or a series of proposals, include serious reparations, turning over to some kind of even Geneva-style conference of regional players to be involved in the solution to Iraq. That the U.S., the only real solution is for the U.S. to give up its dominant say in the outcome. Is this a reasonable proposition, and is it a possible proposition?
Well, I think psychologically it's critical. I think the United States needs to, first of all, acknowledge that it has made a terrible mistake. If not by invading Iraq, then at least by messing it up so grossly in the last 4 years. That would perhaps allow it to regain some credibility, but it's going to be very tough. But then I think an international conference is, in fact, a very important thing to happen. But no country in the world is going to join in such an effort if the United States continues to dominate the political debate and take all the decisions. I think also, for example, it's very important to bring about a regional conference involving the neighboring states that would be sponsored by the international community, let's say the United Nations, for example. But at this point, no permanent members of the Security Council would like to do that if the United States is taking all the decisions. So there will have to be some kind of sharing of responsibility. And so far I have seen no willingness on the part of the Bush administration to go that route. And I think as long as we don't go that route, the situation can only deteriorate. The fundamentals are all wrong in Iraq. And so we need to come to a turnaround. And if this administration cannot do it, then we need to work on the next administration to do it.